Hey ranked ones, Francesco here. Today's video is going to be a bit different from the usual videos, and it's going to be about how poker has changed in the last years, what are the key factors, what matters the most today, and what can we focus on in order to be successful poker players and of course use it as a great tool to have a great life. So, disclaimer, this video is not about doom. Poker is still alive, and it's still possible to make good money. What we need to be aware of, though, is that there are some structural shifts that define the new reality. These factors are outside of our control, so we will not talk about these factors just to complain, but it's important to assess what is the starting point in order to understand how to maximize our EV and our chances in the current environment. So the first important thing is that GTO has become baseline. So sound basic strategy is quite common, and most players arrive with fundamentally theory covered. In general, the bar for entry has risen. It's true, though, that if you are an aspiring pro, today it's much easier to develop good fundamentals compared to the past. We have much better tools at our disposals, but considering that we have access to this, so do our opponents. So it's still very possible to find edges, but you need to be willing to work hard and especially to work smart, because working hard is not just, it's not the only factor that will help you emerge in this environment, because a lot of people might work hard. And by working hard, of course, I mean putting a meaningful volume and also studying in the right way. There is another factor that I think is extremely underestimated by poker players, which is inflation. And inflation erodes win rates. If you see stakes in general, stakes have stayed flat while purchasing power keeps falling. So, and in general, you have to keep in mind that win rates and volume at specific stakes have a hard ceiling. Let's imagine we are successful winners at 2-5. Let's assume we win 5 BB per 100, 6, 7 BB per 100. This win rate can stay the same if we put a ton of work. And of course, compared to the past, the average win rate has also shrank a little bit, because the population on average plays better, but it's still possible to achieve good win rates, especially on some sites on mid stakes. But in general, you have to consider that the win rate is limited. It's not you're gonna have 10 plus BB win rates at these stakes, and also the volume you can play is limited, because you can play only a certain amount of tables at a time, and this becomes especially tougher the more you age. So maybe at 20 something you can play 9 tables, but 9 tables at higher stakes also, it's not that great because you need also to have good quality of decisions, and the more tables you play in general, the worse your average decisions tend to be. And also there's a problem of how many hours you can play, how many hours you can stay focused. So you have to keep in mind that there is an hard cap, and you don't see NL 240. NL 200 is still NL 200, NL 500 is still NL 500. And also, they're not adding other stakes in some markets. For example, in Italian markets, we are capped at 1K NL. We have a buy-in cap of 1K, and this has stayed flat. So this is a serious thing to consider, especially if you are considering to go pro and you're an aspiring pro. If you're already an established pro, of course, you already have, you already had thought about this very likely, and you've already seen the effects on that. Another important thing is that access to big games is shrinking. We have seen this with some sites that have fenced high stakes games, but in general also reaching high stakes is not a realistic goal for most players. So most players will cap at low to mid stakes. And this is important, especially when you look at this in correlation with point number 2. Sure, there are some countries in the world where winning at NL200, NL500 can still net you a significant amount of money, but considering as reason and is rising, you still have to account this for the future. The trend doesn't look ideal, let's say. So again, we don't want to obsess on these factors because we cannot do anything about it, but it's important to assess them to be well prepared and understand what to do. As I said, there are still edges, and the main edge would be to understand why hands take certain lines and to ask relevant questions. So the goal shouldn't be to replicate exact solver frequencies. It's just to understand what is happening and why this is happening. We want to understand deviation and not simply memorize outputs. Of course, in order to understand that, we want to have a solid grasp of equilibrium strategy. And because the idea is that we want to identify, first of all, what is the baseline, and second, understand what our opponents are doing wrong and how we can punish that. So some of these questions we might ask would be, how do I punish a player who bets too often? How do I attack passivity? What size pressures this opponent most? What to do against a sticky player? Can we get away with betting our entire range instead of developing a checking range? And what should our opponent do in order for our strategy to be counter strike? So what we want to achieve is a sort of developing a second nature, which allows us to feel instinctively what line fits a concrete situation against a real player. So we don't just want to think in terms of theory, but we want to feel a sort of second nature, like just have a natural decision at the table. And this is a common trait among very high performers, also in sports and in any discipline. They know, of course, the theory, they know why they're doing something, but when they're doing it, it just feels like second nature to them. And that's what you want to achieve. I will just show you an example of this. And let's say this is a structured approach that I'm taking for hand reviews. I like to create PDF documents where I review some of the most interesting hands of the session. So these hands are from a session in which I played after I had a pretty good start of the year and decided to take a vacation. So this is the first session after the vacation. So I am a bit rusty, and that's why I started to use this thought process to get back in shape and maybe even fix some leaks I was not even aware of. So the first hand, we have a middle position open by a regular, and we call 7-8 suited from the big blind. Of course, we can do, we can 3-bet, we can call this hand fits both line, but again, don't want to focus too much on this. Flop is A6-3 two tones, it goes check check. So already here you would see some players still going for a range bet, and this is not a terrible strategy against some players who will, but again, I don't want to focus on that. I want to focus on the specific line right now. So we get an open-ender on the turn, but the board is two tones. I mean, there's a double flush draw. The turn is a 5. And I decide to bet around 2.5x the pot. This is the correct sizing according to solver. You want on these turnouts, you want to play extremely polarized and play your very strong hands to try to play for sacks. River is the 3 of diamonds, which is not the greatest river for our range because flushes tend to break, tend to create more symmetry. And so while we still have the advantage in terms of sets, we still have pocket 6s, but villain can have pocket aces. Pocket 3s is heavily discounted, and both players can have pocket 5s. So it's of course relevant whether the river is a 3 or a 5, because the opponent might always bet. They always bet pocket 3s, but they might check pocket 5s. So we don't have an advantage of pocket 5s, and pocket 3 gets heavily discounted. So here I decided to bet 2/3, knowing that we have to use only an intermediate sizing, and my opponent calls, shows ace queen. So what do we do here? Here I'm writing. First of all, I will just analyze the hand on Pio, and now you can see it's a very high frequency C betting spot. Then it's the 5 of hearts, and as you can see, we are using this big size. So mostly we would bet top 2 pair plus. Let's say it's a line that wants to play for stacks. We will use some 5x as blocker. This is very important. We have some 4x, which is open-ender, and 8-7 is better than king 4, because king 4 is blocking some of the fold of the check back fold, like king jack, king queen. So 8-7 is chosen as a pure bet. The 8-7 of hearts is taking a check raise line. We can see that there is a slight preference for diamonds over hearts. This is an important heuristic on this texture, because you would see, for example, that this flush draws without parachute. By parachute, I mean like a pair or at least a gut shot, would choose to bet more often when we have the diamonds, because with the hearts we can reverse against. You can see, for example, villain will have this backdoor aces that check back the flop and now improve to not flush draw. So if you make a flush with jack 9 of hearts, you can potentially lose a very big pot. That's why you see these combos betting less often, and you would see diamonds just always, almost always going for a bet, except combos with showdown values like king queen. So our end is fine, and we overbet. You can already see that here it's 0 EV for big aces. So here it's already a spot where you might see some people who are very tight that might overfold, just massively overfold. But in general, if you see that the player is more of the sticky kind, a player that checks a big ace is always to call here. So perhaps the range is going to be medium strength heavy, and you might put them to the test for stacks. However, the problem is, once you get a river like this, you see you have to size down. On the other hand, if you get, let's say, a brick river like a 9, you would see there's a massive overshove here, although the 9 completes our straight. So it's hard to find a complete brick. Let's say on a 3, when you see some all-ins, you see some overbets. But when the flush completes, you see that we use smaller size, and you would start to see that our hand is actually indifferent between block bet or intermediate bet. You see, we don't use almost ever overbet, so it's better to stick to some intermediate option. The same you would see on hearts, even worse. On the hearts, you just want to block, because again, here you have the potential nut flush. So you can have a small part of all-ins, but mostly you want to use a smaller size. And as you can see, once we bet this size, our opponent is still indifferent with some of these big aces, but most likely, if the opponent is sticky, they're gonna call. So one way we can play against this type of player is that we understand that we generate fold equity on the turn, therefore we can give up the river without worrying that this is 8-7. So a wrong way to look at this is to say, I have 8-high, a draw completed, I have to bluff. This is a wrong approach. Another wrong approach is to say, well, the server does this sometimes, so I have to do it. What we really need to focus on is, my opponent can have more ace-x's than they should, and my opponent might overcall this part of the range, therefore bluffing is not very high EV there, but perhaps we want to be bluffing if there is a river like this. You can consider, for example, turning, well, let's put, we have the 8 of spades, so let's put the 8 of clubs here. You know, you can consider even turning this hand into a bluff. 8-7 you can see, I mean, the 7 becomes a straight right now, but a 5x you can turn. The 5 is a more relevant blocker because, as we said, the villain on the flop can check. They will always bet 6s and 3s, but they can check pocket 5s, so they can check ace 5. So on the turn, they improve to some strong hands in the form of ace 5 and pocket 5s. So that's why on the river, we prefer to bluff the 5, and sometimes the 8 also can improve to some of the 2 pairs, like, but although they're supposed to fold, I believe, yeah, without the redraw. But going back here, we can see how what I wrote about the review. So my size on the turn is correct. We want to size down on Broadway turns because they improve more offsuited 2 pairs and set in villain check back range. Again, as we said, the betting range on this turn is structured between top 2 and sets, and we can discount top 2 and flop sets from the opponent's range except pocket aces, of course, which can check back. So on a queen, for example, the queen is very compatible with pocket queens, and pocket queens we would 3-bet pre-flop, so we don't have that. Ace queen, my opponent can check sometimes on the flop, so we lose this 2-pair advantage. We will still want to overbet, but we would use something like 130, 150% of the pot, some intermediate overbet, let's say, on that turn, or even pot or a bit more than pot is fine. This difference is important. You can create a subtree to do that. And again, you assess that this turn improves pocket 5s and ace 5. We can check back the flop. So you know that if you want to have a combo that goes for a big bluff, you can leverage the 5s. So something like 5-7 is good. 5-4, you can pure use these combos if you expect that your opponent will never bluff catch with less than 2 pairs for stacks. You can go for it. And on the river, important to understand this thing. Perhaps even if the solver doesn't like jamming, you can consider just exploitatively jamming against this type of player and use, for example, 5-4, 5-7, just jam this once and give up all the other bluffs. This is also a good strategy. So we understand that when we're up against a sticky player here, this line might work against more tighter players. They would see the flush get in there and say, okay, yeah, there are still, I know that my opponent will only play this size, but here the flush completed. It's true there are some bluffs, but probably you're going to generate some overfold, so this line will print money against this profile. On the other hand, against another sticky player, you probably get snapped by any big ace, and we can assess that they don't overfold them on the turn, but they overcall them, so they end up with more bluff catchers than they should. As we saw, they're supposed to fold a bunch of hands like this one on the turn against my bet. And if they always call against this size, of course, you understand this line is bleeding money. So again, if you want to consider bluffing against this player, you have to consider using a 5 and going only for the all-in. This is a non-theoretical line, but it works in some similar conformations as we saw. For example, on the 6 of hearts, you would see the 5 getting used as a bluff and pocket 5 getting used as a value shot. Another hand, I will not show you all the hand review. It's not just the scope of the video, but just to show you how I structured this hand review. So different spots. In this case, we open ace jack from the button, face a 3-bet by a reg, and I decide to go for a bet this time. I would mix between 4 bets and calls. Flop is ace 5-4, 2 tones. My first instinct here was to play b20 or check, and I know that if I play this strategy here, I need to develop a checking range, so I randomized the check with my hand. So my first question here was, do I want to check combos? I know that the combo with the spade checks. Do I check also the combo with the diamond more often than other combos, because the diamond has a backdoor? So this is relevant in the fact that we will block some running flushes, but probably in 4-bet pots this is not that relevant, because again, spades is one thing, because if you have ace jack of spades, you're blocking jack 10 of spades, which is a hand which will call you. With this hand we don't block that, so this is one argument to bet this hand. But again, an argument to check is that we want to have some aces in our checking range, because we do have pocket kings, pocket queens, pocket jacks, which will mix between bets and checks. So I don't want my checking back range to look like pocket aces or kings, queens, and jacks. Turn is an ace of diamonds, and here I was a bit surprised to see a bet, because this is not it's a spot where I think out of position wants to check a lot. And another question was whether or not I have to develop a raising range. But I thought, if I have the jack of diamond, perhaps I just want to call. If I raise here, I would use only a very small raise size, because I mean, with the jack of diamonds, I'm blocking some potential. The raise would be just a way to put pressure to opponents that are betting too often with draws. So the idea might be they bet to the draw and they only bet the river if they hit. River is a 6 of hearts, they jam, and of course we have a snap call with this hand. We would be indifferent with the pocket queens here, I believe, because pocket queens is better than kings, because my opponent is going to have ace queen offsuit in the calling range. So queens block more value hands than pocket kings or pocket jacks. So again, here I'll show you the summary. It's that flop we want to have some checks if we play b20, and this hand qualifies as a low frequency checking candidate. So this is a quite low frequency candidate. I believe that I should check this like 30% of the time. I believe it's even less right now. But here we can also play an exploitative range bet 10% if we expect villain to underraise. Maybe exploitative is not the right word, because even in theory this is close to really 100%. But of course this strategy is tough if we expect villain to play very aggressively. I will just show you. So again, here we have the b20s, and you can see that we have to check around 40% of the time with the range. And ace-jack does check sometimes. So yeah, as you can see, the jack of diamonds checks a bit more than a non-diamond combo. I believe around 1/3 of the time. So 25. Yeah, I was just a little bit off, but I mean, my assumptions were okay. But we check a bit more in general with the spade. You can see it clearly with ace king here. You can see it even more clearly with ace 10. So we do bet pocket pairs, but we have to mix there. Because again, here villain can just go with this very annoying 2x raise and put a lot of pressure on the pair portion of the range. So I went for the check, which is okay. And as I expected, villain is not supposed really to do betting here. They can just simplify this as a range check. Against my opponent's size, you can see that we can have this small raise. And the idea is that we want to punish. I guess we have to make it as let me create a sub tree very fast here. Let's only allow this and put 2x raise. You can see that we want to use this a lot in game. I thought that having the jack of diamond, we don't want to do it, but apparently it doesn't matter much. So my hand can actually do this slide, and the idea is that you put like you force your opponent to put money in the pot with these draws, either in an aggressive way. If you don't expect them to ever reshove a flush draw, you can basically what you can do with this min raise is that you can use your pairs, and if you don't expect them to ever reshove with these flush draws, they are indifferent, so you can just always fold them because you don't think they would have this hands, and you always call with an ace. If they don't have bluffs, whatever, if you have an ace, I mean, of course you're not folding in a 4-bet pot with trips there. Anyway, even if they only have ace queen, I will not fold ace 10, ace jack. So again, I overestimated the value of the flush blocker on this. I would have raised the combo without the flush blocker here, but I kind of overestimated the relevance of the flush blocker here. So again, best way is just to do this. But anyway, calling is also reasonable in theory. And of course, here we just have to call. As you can see, pocket queens is a better bluff catching candidate than pocket kings. But again, the opponent is not supposed to have a ton of those combinations. My opponent was even supposed to pure check his combo on the turn, and you might think, what do they do with that? It's just, even if it's a gut shot, it's just a terrible board for his range, so they're supposed to check. This might look like a spot where my opponent made a mistake and maximized the hand. These spots will happen, but how do we assess this? Again, first thing to understand is that we can range bet 10% if we don't expect villain to be crazy raise heavy with 10% raise, and I will show you also this. This is the 10%. You can see this. We just go for range, and again, they're supposed to raise over 30% of the time. They're supposed to find calls with pocket pairs without a backdoor. So this strategy in practice can overperform. On turns like this, you can, again, bet your entire range. And again, it's just, if your opponent is never finding bluffs, you can always fold pairs and just defend an ace. It's very, 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 very straightforward. So by trying to mimic some sort of GTO play, I just ended up complicating my life there. I mean, I was a bit rusty. I didn't even think about the bet 10% in game, but when I was reviewing, I immediately thought, wait a second, but here I could use this. So in this way, not only I would play a GTO strategy with similar theoretical EV, but this is also much easier for me to play, and it also allows my opponent to make more mistakes. So this will be a superior approach there. And again, another way, another example of hand is this one. And this one is just the cooler. Why do I review this hand? Because my question was about, first of all, I wanted to see how my opponent is supposed to play on this turn, and also whether or not I should use, what kind of size I should use it there, if I should go for a geometric size or consider some half potish and polarize on the river. And my instinct was to go geometric, and I went geometric. And also my other question was whether or not I always have to bet trips here. And of course the answer is not, because first of all, we want to protect our checking back range, and second, this is a very tight range conformation, big blind versus early position 3-bet pot. So it's not the most attractive texture to bluff for stacks as the 3-bet caller here. So we want to be aware that a tighter opponent, for example, might only call us with traps. I'm not saying it's the case of my opponent specifically. My opponent is a good player, so they are gonna find also bluff catches with other hands like ace king time to time. But it's a spot where against a lot of players, if you have ace king, I think you can just ditch them because they're not gonna find enough bluffs here. And again, it's not exactly the spot that you see and you immediately want to bluff. So how do we study in the post-solver era? Again, what I was doing is showing you how I approach hand review. This is not the only approach, but it's something that I like because I like to start from a concrete problem at the table and allow curiosity to drive study, not just the urge to finish a solver tree. So well before I would advocate for analyzing specific situations. I mean, of course, analyzing specific spots like 3-bet pots, what to check raise is crucial if you still don't have sound basic strategy nailed down. Obviously, you should prioritize that if you don't have that part of the game tree solved. But once you're already familiar with what a basic strategy looks like, you need to ask relevant questions. So start from concrete problems, be driven by curiosity, and understand what are the key points. Also try to generate an edge versus people that just are trying to copy either solver or just follow MDA charts without understandings. Obviously, the exploits that you will have are different, but you have to learn to exploit both, because both heavy solver-oriented players and MDA-based players are very relevant in the landscape of low mid stakes. So understanding what the goal of their strategy is crucial to understand where you have to deviate. And another important thing is that you just have to own whatever you can do, because there are macro factors, environmental factors that you cannot change. You don't have control about that, but of course you have control about study quality, game selection. So don't start I mean, you can rank battle for fun, sure, but don't make it the main part of your play time. You can, for example, dedicate like 10-20% at most of your play time to rank battle, to improve your game, or if you just want to have a challenge, sure, go for it. But in general, game selection is a crucial factor where you can still generate an edge today. I mean, it's always been, but today more than ever, it's even more important. And also mental readiness, have mental endurance, be prepared. It's all it's all up to you, and you can have different strategies away from the tables to develop that. So I'm thinking in terms of having a healthy lifestyle, or having healthy finances as well, allow you to deal with the downswings better. But again, about this, we have to understand that today downswings are more common than in the past, because the narrower the edges, the longer and the sharper the downswings will get. So in order to have a competitive edge, it's important to have a life in order. Again, being disciplined, keeping a healthy volume, having the right breaks, keeping some study, some leisure time, taking care of your health, all these things are trainable. And it's as trainable as just technical competence. Most players just focus on that. Either they focus on theoretical knowledge, or they focus on volume. If you just do that, you will hit a wall sooner or later. Not because there's not much more you can learn. Actually, the poker theory is extremely complex, so there's always something new to learn if you know where to look. But increasing your knowledge by a fraction of percentile is not going to give you as many benefits as you would get by taking care of things that can give you a massive edge, such as having good sleep, exercising, practicing mindfulness. And by mindfulness, I'm not referring just to meditation. It can be even going for walks in the park, in the nature, having social sports, whatever allows you to develop mental clarity, to distress, and to have something to think about outside of poker. So it's very important to have a healthy routine, and all these tools at your disposals are going to protect your A game during rough stretches. So it's just very important that you don't go into either stretches where you don't play at all and just obsessively focus on study, or you play too much trying to chase your losses. Both these approaches are equally at fault for different reasons. It's very important to find the balance. It's perfectly fine to decrease your volume when things are not going that well. It's perfectly fine also to take breaks if you had good times and you just want to enjoy some of your late winnings. So all of these things are perfectly enjoyable, but at the end it's important to have a solid routine. And I really think that nowadays mental game is the last real moat and the key factor to manage the edge today. So managing tilt, managing pressure, managing losing streaks is something that really can make the difference. One of the most important factors as well is related to managing bankroll and net worth. So it's important also to put things in perspective. Again, considering what we were saying towards the beginning of the video, you should see poker as a tool for building wealth if poker is your main source of income right now. So I highlighted 4 principles that are helpful to see poker in an appropriate role for the financial situation. So the first one is to separate bankroll from net worth. So your poker bankroll should be seen as a working tool, not your savings. So don't put all your net worth in bankroll and use it both for living expenses and as a full net worth. You need to separate accountings between poker roll, life roll, and investments or whatever. It's very important to have at least 12 months of emergency fund. It can also be up to 24 if you play high stakes tournament where you have even higher variance. So this is important because you don't want downswings or deciding to play higher stakes affect your financial stability and your daily life. So you want to have the key expenses covered at least. And also, it's very important to invest recurring poker earnings. So the idea is that by investing regularly, we build a path towards financial independence, financial freedoms, and potentially we can also create new income streams outside of poker, whether it is real estate or dividends from stocks or bonds or other activities that guarantee you some cash flow. This provides a significant psychological benefit, especially during rough stretches. And again, you can also just invest towards accumulation. You don't have to invest into cash flow. It's whatever works for you. So, of course, if you get cash flows, you get taxed on that. So, I mean, I don't want to provide financial advice right now. It's better, of course, if you hire an independent financial advisor to get a better picture. But even if, let's say, you invest in not in the most efficient way, whether it is for maximizing net worth or just from a tax perspective, this can still provide some psychological benefits that will end up giving you a higher EV long term. For example, if you just invest into accumulating, but then you see that stock market is down or you are in a downswing, you don't see a cash income stream, you might be demotivated in that time, and this might backfire and you would maybe decrease volume or your playing quality will deteriorate. You can have this backfire on you. Well, if you have some cash flow from other sources, you might see that you're still doing fine. I mean, you're still getting some form of income even when you're losing at the table. So this might provide some extra psychological edge in that case. Of course, every person is different. So some people don't mind being down both at the tables and both outside of the table. So this is really a personal thing. Again, the main thing is that you just invest regularly and build a path towards financial independence. So you should see poker as a tool to boost growth, not just to sustain your life. It should not be the only pillar holding everything up, but it's a great tool to accelerate net worth growth. And again, especially it's a great tool to build the capital to start, but it might not be the best tool to scale your capital up to a certain point if your goal is to have a meaningful growth. Again, as we saw earlier, there is a cap in earnings for most people, especially if you consider that you will mostly cap at 500, 1K. And now, if that will be your cap, you have to consider that the income you can get out of poker has a cap. On the other hand, the income that you can get out of investment is not capped and can continue to grow. So by investing wisely, of course, you can use poker as a tool to build a good starting capital, and you can still use poker as your primary activity, of course. In my case, poker is still my main source of income, but of course, by building other income streams, eventually you might get to a point where the income you will get out of investments might even be higher than the income you will get out of poker. Well, for most people, that would be even. If you're doing well with poker, this is already beyond the reaching financial independence. It's a pretty solid financial independence that allows you to get some extra luxuries in your life. But with financial independence, I'm just saying that the main goal should be that you reach a state where you don't necessarily have to work to cover your expenses, but it doesn't mean that you stop working, because you still want a purpose in your life. So you can still work, you can perhaps decrease your workload, or you can for example, dedicate a few months of the year to poker. The other months you can dedicate to travel or to other hobbies you might have. Like you might pursue even training for a marathon, or if you like sports, if you like music, you pursue whatever hobby you want. But again, this is a path that you build, and it's more realistic to see poker, I think, as a tool than just to consider it as a 9-to-5 job, especially considering that the 9-to-5 job tends to scale with the salary tends to scale with inflation, but poker has the promise that we discussed. So this was everything for today. Hoped you enjoyed this video that was slightly different than usual. So let me know in the comment what you thought about that. If you like this format, if you prefer more traditional content, let me know what you think, and I'll see you next time. Bye bye.